Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our first series of leadership conversations by Relevate. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Sheila Dodson, Director of Industry Relations for Relevate, who are the makers of Relevate AMS, Association Management Systems, and a single sign-on project. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn if you haven't already. Many of you know me from various CEO positions I've held over the last 20 years. I come from a unique position of knowing the industry from the inside out. Chat is disabled, but question and answers will be open for us to answer towards the end. To begin our conversation, I want to show a clip from a massive change that impacted thousands as an introduction to change. The barge and seeing that great big bridge go down into the Patapsco River in Maryland, or Baltimore Harbor. What you just watched is something that happened in real time. It lasted 40 seconds to take that bridge down and into that river. I woke up early one morning to read my phone, which I don't normally do, but there's a big alert on there that the Francis Scott Key Bridge had fallen into the river. And I was just shaken. Not only am I from Maryland, I remember going over that bridge and everyone's fear about it because it was very steep and it was just a scary bridge. But for people commuting back and forth through Baltimore's tunnel area, it was a very important structure. And I could just imagine, I couldn't imagine that this bridge had just gone down. And I can tell you that when the engineers examining that bridge, and all the different scenarios that they had when they built that bridge, they never once thought about a loaded barge hitting at the right point to bring the whole bridge down. And that is change that happens to us. We don't really understand or know how to take in because we've never prepared for it. Sometimes the changes we don't see coming are the most difficult to grow through. Now, enough about me controlling the screen. I want to introduce our guest today, Anne Gardner, who has a long and varied career in the association industry. And I'm going to let her fill you in about herself in a moment. Today's topic, change leads growth. So, Anne, welcome and thank you for joining us today. So, let's tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. Well, first off, I just want to say, Sheila, I'm thrilled that you're putting this series together and that so many of the conversations that you and I have enjoyed as colleagues over the years, together and with others, it's it's often in these moments that we get the best insight and ideas. And so I think it's tremendous to start a series of just real conversations that we've all had over the years and how we navigate things. And change is a topic we all talk about often. Change is something that I'm pretty familiar with in that I'm a first career association executive. I've been in this business for 30 years and started with professional societies and medical subspecialty and association management companies, and then came into the realtor world for the last 24 years. So it has been a wandering path, and unexpected change has definitely been, I would say, an impetus for that journey.
So good. That journey of growth is really what we're talking about.
It
Came
is.
from a lot of different ways. Right? So let's start with a simple point. How do you view growth?
Well, I would say growth is that wandering path. It's rarely going to be linear. Maybe when we're junior, when we're first in learning a skill or a subject, we have a learning plan and we have guidance and mentors and, if you will, safety rails. But when you get into the kind of growth that we're talking about, it's oftentimes something you didn't anticipate, something you have no model for and no structure for. And so for that, it happens in stops and starts. It happens when the opportunity visits you and you rise to the challenge. And the alternative is you freeze or turn away from it or go very insular and don't take that opportunity and that challenge. But it's something I've seen in myself and in staff that I've had the opportunity to work with over the years, that it's what happens when you're making plans. As they say, everything about life is.
Yes. And, I've often said that you can't stand still. The world that we live on, this planet, unfortunately, it doesn't spin so fast that it knocks us down. But when something happens, like that bridge falling down or other things, we do tend to freeze because it's so unexpected. But that is not the correct reaction, because living in a world that's spinning means that you can't stand still. You're either moving forward or you're going backwards. So it's a very good point there you said about not freezing. So, how do you experience growth and what comes to mind when you think of it?
Well, I think growth is what really creates opportunity. And I think there are a few key areas where if we're if we're prepared and if we're poised for it, by that I mean we're sitting in a place of openness and curiosity, then it's, in my experience, a lot easier to navigate and to understand that, especially things like right now with what our industry is facing and even the world, not everyone is watching to see if you're doing it perfectly. And so there's some fundamentals with that that I believe will help you couch and how you receive these opportunities for growth and for change. It's something that I learned over time from when I was new in my association management career, long before working with trade organizations. I was in my 20s and I was working with an association management group, and I had a plan, right? I joined them. I'd been with them 8 or 9 months. Things were going very well. And the client group I was working with decided they were ready to move standalone and create their association from whole cloth. And it was really, really interesting opportunity because I was offered the chance, along with my executive director at the time, to leave and help them start and look for office space, hire all the staff, furniture, administration, operations, finishing construction. And that was a really pivotal time because I learned areas that I really could dig into, that I enjoyed, that I was good at and had talent at. And I became known as someone that could work on big buildings eventually and could work on construction projects and reorganizations. And so that all came from a completely unexpected tilt.
So, you learn new trades and new skills because you sort of stepped out of what you were doing sort of maybe by rote, and then you learn. So, we're saying that change is constant, it's going to be embraced. But so, if it's constant, give us some of the tools you developed to depend upon when change
Sure,
comes.
sure. I know we're all going to approach this differently, right? And so, what I share is just what I've developed over time, what peers like yourself have helped coach me on, and the first thing I would say is, going back to just being open, creating that open posture. And then these issues are often larger than any one of us can feel like we can adequately handle. And many of us have responsibility for quite large budgets and groups of individuals who are counting on us to know the answer or at least be the source of the answer. And I've often said that if I'm not the answer, I will guarantee to be the source of the source. Well, in order to do that, you have to have a peer network. You have to have some resources to draw on. And I think it's tremendous actually that you're on the vendor side, because I I've enjoyed you as a colleague on the association management side, and now on the vendor side, you actually are in a space that I have drawn on for many, many years. And that is our vendor partnerships and seeing those as true partnerships and an opportunity to problem solve together. Because, where you are now, the seat you are now, you see what challenges associations have all over the country. You probably see similarities, you see opportunities for synergy. And so I've often tapped into that as part of my peer network, and just knowing that the sum of us is better than the one of us in that regard. And so I would say that's really the second thing that I've learned to lean into, because we're all looking for ways to serve our clients and customers better, to deliver the best service we can. And at the end of the day, we're not all going to have the answers ourselves.
That's for sure. That is for sure. So you mentioned knowing yourself and gathering partners you know and trust, using peer group as a sounding board and a source of ideas.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there anything else that's really neat in that?
You know, I I would go back to the fact that when you're approaching, you're building a peer group, you're building it out of shared interest, if you will, and a shared problem. But when you're approaching it, how many of us are maybe reticent to take that first step or step out? And, personally, I'm not that much of an extrovert. I really like to know that when I come into a conversation, although I can be quite lively when I'm in it, I typically want to know, is there something that I can offer when I approach someone in conversation or in seeking out problem solving? Because it is about give and take. And just as I'm struggling with an issue and a problem to solve or a challenge that I need to grow through, someone else has a different issue that maybe I might have encountered or that I might have some expertise in order to be able to offer them some support as well. Because that's really what builds that trusted network, is it has to be give and take. And so I've learned through great experience as well, that when I approach with the idea that, is there something I can offer to help in any situation as I approach it, then I want to be seen as a partner as well.
And something else you've mentioned over the years, we're fortunate enough that we met a long, long time ago at an NAR event where we gathered and we found out both of us were going to be new uh, associations that had brand new AMS coming. Not going to be the same one. So it created a bond there because we were both curious about what was coming. So we began to rely on that, going through the same situation. And ironically enough, our associations even had some of the well, same dialogue information size was available to us. And so it created that. But we both had to be curious and open to what was being discovered. Can you expand on that curious part? Because in today's world,
Yeah.
there's lots more opinion, I think. There's a lot more opinion and cultures, new norms, and voices. How do we deal with all of that in a courteous way? Still remaining
You know,
open.
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, we can all get distracted by the noise. And I certainly think that the past year and a half within our industry, there's been plenty of that, as folks who don't know us, who aren't part of us, who have entered into the space and the commentary. It's easy to get distracted in that regard. And so I think staying focused on what you're trying to accomplish and the lift that you're looking to affect on behalf of others, because it's a great responsibility that we have in that regard. Whether we're volunteer leaders or you're a vendor partner or an association executive, we all have a responsibility to uphold and keep the momentum moving forward and to not be distracted. And so I think focusing on that and understanding that we may not all have complete information from one another, we may not have all the answers, but starting from a place of assume good intent. In absence of information, the world rarely inserts the highest and best outcome. And so it's a temptation to to go that way. But, as I've heard you say before, focus on the new, avoid the chaos. I think that's something really brilliant that you follow that I've actually tried to model as well. And just know that we're going to move through it. We're going to make it out on the other side of just about any of our challenges that we have.
That's one of the beautiful things that are in this industry overall, and others too, is that we have, I don't know what the current count is, but about 800 local associations and 54 state associations, all sort of doing the same thing. And so there's always someone that you can see doing something and rely on. And
I know
that
where you're
is
going. I know
helpful.
where you're going
That
now.
that is helpful. So what relationships have you built to rely upon when did you accomplish it?
Sure. Well, I'll give an example, but you know, I definitely can draw on one in particular that I know you know this story already, so I will share it. When I was a new association executive, and I was suggested by a member to meet another local executive working in a similar space with emergency repairs and home improvements in the community. And so we were suggested to have coffee, and we did. And, you know, I think it's an example of sort of how I have learned to move through professional networks over the years. She was sharing with me some challenges that her organization had, and in that I saw she got quite emotional, and about you could tell it really touched her when she was describing the size of the emergency home repairs list, because in the very small community to have 400 people on a list at any point in time, it was a daunting challenge to be able to find opportunities to help those individuals. But even more so, she let me know in that coffee meeting, half of that list were senior citizens. And that struck a chord because I knew the organization I was working with had an opportunity to help, to be, even if it was just a small part of the solution. And so Impulse took over, and I committed to 10 wheelchair ramps that year from the organization. And I came back and talked about it with the leaders and the other team members, and it really galvanized us in the community, and it positioned the organization in a way that paid media never could. It was definitely something that we all rallied around and engaged on. And so it really bloomed from that conversation. And in 3 years, it became the other organization's complete brand identity. It became their entire campaign. And within 3 years, it was bringing in over $150,000 for that program.
Oh, wow. It's fabulous. It's
From
such a
coffee,
legacy.
right? From
Yeah,
coffee.
over coffee. Just because you went in being a little curious and open. Wow, that's
You know,
fabulous.
and I stepped out. I didn't have permission,
I was
but
thinking
it
that,
seemed
oh, you
right.
committed to something and
I
didn't
didn't
have
have
board
permission, but
approval.
it felt right. And to me, that's an example of if you've got your focus and if you know that the space you're taking on behalf of others and on behalf of your mission is moving forward with the best of intent, and you have the information and you have trusted individuals to work with, then it's okay to step out. Frankly, right now, we all have to step out. We're having to work with things we are not familiar with, that we've never done before, that we don't know where the outcome will take us. And so it's a learned skill, but it's something that anybody, I believe, can do.
So how did that end up? What ended up happening?
It's still an active campaign many years
Oh, that's
later. It's
fabulous.
still a hallmark in the community. And interestingly, it's the community I just moved back to. So
That's
had a
great.
certain place in my heart.
Yes. I think it's just such a wonderful situation to create that legacy, um, and to help others and to see it continue is quite an accomplishment. Um, we all know that real estate is the one way that there is wealth created for an individual. beyond a lot of other ways. And I feel for those senior citizens that were possibly losing their biggest nest egg and shelter, um, and at an organization related to real estate that seen sometimes as just takers and not givers was given that opportunity. So kudos to you and the organization
Well,
for backing you.
thank you, but I have to tell you, the entire community came together. You know, the home builders came together. To me, that's an example of that peer network, right?
Right.
That we have we have that opportunity. And we just say, who else needs to be in that conversation? And you just step forward. And so Wells Fargo, you know, lots of people in the community just rallied around it. And it became so much more than the two people that wanted to solve a problem one day. And I think so many of our solutions, so many, so many things of what we're going to be coming out of this time with are going to be born of those happy coincidences.
Well, that brings up a point that I'd like to cover in that it's about building relationships in and out of your direct peer group, looking for opportunities that accomplish your mission and goal. It may
Mhm.
not have been part of the strategic plan to have awareness in the community to come together and build homes and repair homes, but it certainly aided in your mission. So, for these opportunities require us to stick out, to go, and can often be scary. So, when you're faced with those times, planning is everything. So, how do we plan and prepare for those times? When because we never know when they're gonna come in, like those poor people and those 6 men that lost their lives on a bridge that fell in. We don't know what we're gonna face. So what qualities or attitude do you have to have in order to face those times, to be ready when and if it
Well,
comes?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to be the unequivocal on that at all, but you know, I know personally that working within trust and knowing myself, and there was an analogy that just sort of always comes to mind when I'm, you know, leading or coaching or whatnot, and it's you can say, well, where do you start? Which is sort of where your question is, right? Where do we begin? And I think that it's easy to say, well, I'm just going to sit back and practice, or I'm going to get ready for, or I'm fixing to get ready. But it's like the analogy of when's the best time to plant a tree? And the answer is 20 years ago. Well, there's also another answer. What's the second best time to plant the tree? And it's today. We just start from where we are. You know, situations are always changing. And so the knowledge that you think you need to have in order to start engaging, you're gathering it in real time. So be brave, just begin, be open and vulnerable. You know, vulnerable is a really almost cliched word now, but it's really necessary for us to band together and look for ways that we can surmount the challenges.
So being aware, knowing ourselves, and probably having a feeling like the tree. When you see something amiss, then do something about it today because
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like you've always been a great example of that. I mean, I'm just going to brag on you for a second because
this is on me.
you've certainly done
This is
plenty of
you.
that. But, you know, just for example, what you did with, you know, it's unfortunate that it's not active any longer, but when you were in Alabama, you know, you saw a need there with, you know, self-funded and self-insured members of our profession. And I don't think you had any idea that where you started from would become what it did. And that's really tremendous.
Well, thank you. It's one of the best things I think that I did. uh, And just seeing a need and then hearing of an opportunity
Yeah,
and being able to
absolutely.
pursue it. Um,
And
Not knowing what
you
was going to
manage,
come. And like you, I had the backing of a board because it was the right move to make. Unfortunately, politics got in the middle of it, but it's still there. It's just not working quite as well as it did when the government allowed realtors to buy, to be a collective group to buy. So
But yeah,
it wouldn't stop me from doing it again. And I think that's part of what you're saying. You know, what's that saying about fresh starts? You can always start again, but you've still got to start in order to do it. That's part of what I think you're
yeah,
trying to get across
that's
here.
very wise. Very
Is to
wise.
do it.
So,
And the other thing is about when we face these things, what are we going to do in response? Or again, going back to the bridge, there were 7 people that actually fell in the water that night, but
mm,
one man was able to get out. One didn't take, he acted in some way, and I don't know the circumstances around it, it doesn't matter, but he didn't take, change happened, and he did something about it. It's
wow.
important to remember with
Mm,
ourselves because we can only control our own response. We can't control everyone else's when things happen.
100%.
So
Yeah.
we've got to explore alternative solutions and focus on what we can accomplish. And just like the tree, do it regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
Try,
You may
reach
feel like
out,
you're
and
behind the
do it.
curve, but yeah, but for me, I mean, it comes back to what I've heard you say, which is, focus, no, only work from what you can control and don't buy into what you think are the limitations.
Right,
You'll be
right. And those
amazed at how much you'll grow from something you say, "Oh no, here we go again."
and that can be often our first response to some of these things.
It's true.
So we're going to be
True.
opening up for questions and answers here in a little bit. So anybody that has some questions, please go ahead and submit them so that we can see them, and talk about them a little bit. Um, and it was so wonderful to have you here today. And like the bridge falling, but foreseeing the possibility of that occurring. What analogy can we see for growth coming from such tragic events?
Oh gosh. Um, you know, we don't see the opportunities sometimes in front of us for that. And and I would just say to be calm and to just be receptive and open to that. An analogy per se doesn't necessarily come to mind. You probably have something in mind yourself, but I would just say that it's it's jarring, you know. It's we're vulnerable in all of that, as I said, and
Mhm.
to just have that faith to just draw from what is sincere and genuine, and just know that you're doing the best you can. We all are.
Yes. And it doesn't even have to be a tragic event sometimes to be overwhelming. Um,
Yeah.
the opportunities when they come can seem overwhelming, but it doesn't mean that they have to be. Take a little bit at a time.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, I would even say there's something I was saying the other day that, every thought isn't a fact,
ah,
you know? And so I think that's something that maybe holds us back sometimes, put the thoughts on trial if you need to.
right.
Ask them, play Perry Mason, ask them if they're facts. Work with the
Yeah.
facts and keep going.
Yeah. Or Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am. Facts. um,
All right.
it's a really old one. Some people are going to be going, "Who is
Now,
she
now,
talking
now
about?"
they're like,
But
okay.
mhm. So focus on the new. When we can talk the chaos with what we're talking about. Look
Yeah.
for new solutions, or look to your past and brush off something and bring them forward. So, one of our questions we have here is, what are some practical tips for how to find and build your own support system, especially maybe in a new industry?
Attend every event you're invited to, I would say. We have so many opportunities to cross paths with someone that we normally wouldn't even be aware of or know when we are at these meetings and events. And I know it can be long days, it can be daunting, and you can say, I'd really rather just have a few minutes of quiet than to go to that networking event or that one last session. But that openness and curiosity to always learn and to always look for individuals who may be thinking the same thing or working on a challenge, I would say just put yourself in front of as many people as you can and just learn, absorb, take in, take the notes.
Right. So absorb, and open. I had a colleague once say that she used to go to these events and she'd think that she had to have, if she was there for 4 hours, she had to have the whole hour and every minute being productive or good for her. And then she realized that if she came out with one new idea, it was worth it. One new thought or one new connection, it was worth it. Instead of thinking I had to have 100%, but that one was really enough to carry and to do. I think that's what you're saying. Don't attend everything because you don't know what you're going to get out of it. So that sort of goes along with another question. Any tips for how to get myself into the right mindset of what I can give to a new contract? Excuse me, a new contact, somebody we meet new. How do we stay in that giving mode instead of the taking mode?
We listen. I think it's really simple. We listen. It's something that we as leaders are oftentimes not dissuaded from doing, but it's one of those skills that often lifts you into leadership roles. However, the noise, the schedules, the meetings, the whatnot, we're often then, when you're in that position, you're looked at as a person who knows it, who now needs to espouse and tell and lead and guide. And you can't keep sharp, you can't keep new ideas if you don't also reserve that time to listen and to
And
keep
not
doing it
listening
at
to
every level in
respond.
the
Yeah.
organization,
Yeah,
right?
that's the trouble with our communication. Yeah. Listening to respond instead of listening to what's being said to us.
But I think it's
Points.
the, to that question, I think, to that individual, I'd say just don't lose that no matter what level you are in your career path or in what side your seat is in our world right now. The value of listening is where, for me, it's been incredibly impactful because then you can make the connections. Then you can know who from one conversation or one situation might benefit from another person. And if you can be seen as a conduit, as a person who knows how to put people together, knows who needs to have a conversation with the other, that's a very, very valuable skill set to bring forward.
Yes, it is. And it's one that's going to be learned. It's not a natural ability. Well,
You're
that
giving
leads
away
us
all the
into
secrets, Sheila.
no, no, that's the whole point. We want to give.
It is the whole
You
point.
know,
It is the
you
whole
give.
point. We
If you
do.
hold your
We do.
hands closed, then you can't receive. And if you do, you can't receive as much. That's
There
what we're
you
trying
go.
to do here. Is give.
I agree. I agree.
So that leads us, we're in a very difficult situation, organized real estate today. And like the bridge, um, I've heard ever since I joined this industry that the MLS was going away. And
Oh, sure.
would send fear into me as a selling agent. And then I heard associations don't depend on your MLS cap. Your MLS as your cash cow because it's not always going to be here. You're not always going to have it. But in all the different scenarios that we've all prepared for and thought about,
Hmm.
just like the bridge coming down, I don't think anybody really, really foresaw a loaded barge hitting the bridge coming down. And I don't think any of us foresaw or thought it would happen. That the illegal antitrust issue come along, create is being created in organized real estate. Just like those poor people relied on that bridge to go back and forth to commute every day, we're going to be affected. I'm afraid we're going to have consumers at a lot of different levels affected. So that can become very negative. So the other question that was given to us is how do I break the spiral of negative self-talk about an impending change? What's your thoughts there?
Well, I'm actually going to go to one of our Q&As, and Dan, who offered some insight there, I think is a little prescient with that. And that is that, you know, coming back to being observant versus being the sage on the stage, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
is I think really something that would be quite impactful for that. And to just keep positioning yourself in that opportunity to receive and to just stay part of the conversation.
Beginning to low and beginning to learn and grow. We surmise that. But I also think that negative self-talk only, I mean, it happens in the 6 inches that we all have. And I think the only way that you can really overcome that, the impending change and the fear that comes with that, is to replace it with a different mantra going through. No, instead of saying, "We can't be done." I mean, one that I used to use years ago was, "I can, I will, I believe." And it's not my mantra. It actually belonged to Beverly Buffini. But I could find myself saying that over and over when I was feeling overwhelmed about things that I was facing or changes that were coming that I didn't know how they were going to affect. I just knew I could overcome it. I would overcome it. And I believed I could overcome it. And so I think that's another tool that we can have is just controlling our own thoughts because it's hard enough to control ourselves, never let anybody else. So I think those are just some points. Anything else that you want to say in closing or add into this?
No, I feel like we have thrown about 30 years worth of how we've navigated change into our conversation. So I feel like the tank is tapped on that,
Yeah,
you know?
good,
So
good. Well, I don't know about you, but I feel really good because we spent the time focusing on things from our own experiences that then give to each other. The idea behind the series is to give, and it's not to take. But I will say relevate is a real word which means to return to good spirits. And that's exactly our goal, to return AMSs and single sign-on systems to being the cornerstone of a great member experience, which is something that we can all share and do, whether you're a vendor, whether you're an executive, whether you're a staff member, whether you're an NAR person. Um, Relevate's a software company that makes SSO and AMS systems. As partners in this industry, bringing the conversations to meet the needs of the realtor community, including leadership, vendors, staff, and others who may find our topics interesting and supportive to their new working lives. Relevate, to raise a new spirit, is the purpose of these conversations, and it's not a sales pitch. We want to relevate and bring relevant conversations to our audience, our peers, and our friends in this industry. I want to thank you, Anne, for being with us today and speaking
yeah,
to us. Some of your key points have been know yourself, find partners you know and trust, develop a peer group and give to and use as a sounding board, and give of yourself. All very important points that we need today. I do want you to sign up with us, follow us on LinkedIn again. I'll remind you of that. We will be posting our next conversations and things that we have, which our next one will be, our guest will be Laura Crowther, who many of you know Laura and the accomplishments she's had in the Coastal Carolinas Association of Realtors. Excuse me. Don't miss it. And she will be sharing the building community action. So follow us on LinkedIn to register. Thank you all so much for joining us.
thank you.
Okay, bye.